political. They just lie. They cover their and they lie. I would have been very happy to have her on. And like I said, the goal was to release both of them the same day. They just got scared. They could have put her in. I would have held her hand. We would have had a conversation. I'm not going to be antagonistic. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be. I have no desire to turn this into a viral clip thing.
Kamala's audience squirms as she yaks about pachyderms. Our video of the day comes to us from the former VP who made her first major speech last night since Trump took office. And it was another classic ball of verbal vomit.
Kamala Harris seemed to believe she could drift through interviews with loose metaphors and a quick laugh, brushing off tough questions along the way, until Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld stepped in with sharp humor and pointed facts. From her tangled speeches to the moments she goes quiet from serious issues, they start peeling back the polished image piece by piece. This isn't just a roast for laughs. It's a closer look at leadership that sounds confident, but often feels unclear. Thought Kamala was confusing before? Just wait until you see how she reacts when the spotlight gets hotter and the questions get harder. Buckle up, because this breakdown doesn't hold back.
Favorite part was when Kamala Harris shows up, looks over and sees that Obama and Trump are talking to each other, and she goes like,
yeah,
watch this. Look at her face.
Off.
Look how angry she is, dude. Look how angry she is. It's unbelievable. Melania's like, I can't believe I have to be first lady once again.
She did her first sit-down interview all by herself like a big girl. But when we talk about bringing down prices and making life affordable for people, what are one or two specific things she has in mind for that?
When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. You know, I grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were very...
Hysteria shows up quickly when a political image leans too heavily on nervous laughter, broad slogans, and the strange habit of talking in circles that leave people more confused than informed. Kamala Harris, once promoted as a symbol of the future of female leadership, seemed to step away from the spotlight with the awkward momentum of a shopping cart rolling on damaged wheels. There's an ironic twist in how her journey began in the courtroom as a prosecutor and later turned into a target of public criticism about the same justice system she once defended. Meanwhile, the Joe Rogan Experience host Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld stepped in with sharp jokes, pointed commentary, and the kind of blunt questions that hit like a rhetorical sledgehammer.
Now that Joe's incapacitated, Cam gets celebrated. It's a master class in kissing some Cam ass. Video of the day comes to us from liberal media hacks who can't get enough of Kamala Harris since she became the Dems presidential sharp. It's like, please kill me. Sorry, Joe, the analogy doesn't quite work because unlike Rocky, Kamala can't blame her bizarre speeches on repeated blows to the head.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the bell so you never miss more straight talk commentary like this. Now let's talk about Kamala Harris and her well-known habit of putting sentences together in a way that sometimes feels like someone reading IKEA assembly instructions out loud after a few margaritas. Kamala didn't always sound like she was explaining policy. It often felt like she was speaking in circles. Try mapping out one of her speeches on paper and you might find the sentences looping back on themselves instead of moving the idea forward.
There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that...
Joe Rogan joked that her reasoning sometimes felt like a glitch in the Matrix running on too much caffeine. One moment she appeared to nod enthusiastically as a crowd applauded without a clear point, and the next she was carefully explaining the passage of time as if it were a brand new discovery. It almost made you want to hand her a clock and a reassuring hug. The moment felt less like leadership and more like a live philosophy lesson taught by someone who once read a quote from Plato printed on a coffee mug.
I'm sure you saw that lady making fun of the guy selling her the champagne because he wasted his vote on Trump.
He asked me why I was getting the champagne, and I said, because I'm going to be toasting Madam President tonight. And I said, you do realize you wasted your vote, right? I walked out with my bottle of champagne.
She really believed it.
So, as you know, Kamala Harris did not win the election.
Greg Gutfeld, unsurprisingly, leaned into the criticism. He joked about watching Kamala Harris move from topic to topic whenever serious questions came up. Instead of directly answering, it often felt like she was performing in a cloud of political fear. When reporters asked about inflation, her response sometimes sounded more like storytelling than policy explanation. When foreign policy came up, she would begin long answers that seemed to drift away from the original question, and at times, even she appeared to lose track of the point midway through.
Kamala Harris, when Tulsi Gabbard took her out at the hamstrings, that's a wrap, baby.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. She put over 1,500 people in jail for violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever...
Have you ever?
I have. I didn't.
Okay.
She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
And yet she was somehow named the border czar. That's not satire, it really happened. Harris was given responsibility connected to border issues, but critics often pointed out how rarely she appeared at the border itself. Joe Rogan joked that the situation felt like putting a squirrel in charge of airport security. Technically active, but not exactly reassuring. Greg Gutfeld highlighted what he saw as irony. Harris once campaigned on transparency and progress, yet often stayed out of the spotlight when difficult topics came up. Big issues like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the war in Ukraine, and rising inflation dominated headlines, while critics said her public presence seemed limited during those moments. They joked she reappeared mostly for ceremonies, public events, or speeches where climate change was explained through long metaphors that sounded more poetic than scientific. Gutfeld even quipped that listening to those explanations felt like hearing astronomy described by someone guessing from memory, confident delivery, but unclear detail.
You have a candidate that is the least liked vice president of all time, the least popular vice president of all time, and then use gaslighting and the full force of the media machine to turn her into the future and hope.
Right.
And then she's gonna be change, even though she's the sitting vice president. And then on top of that, this idea of change when the Democrats have been in control for what, 12 of 16 years?
Right.
Which is crazy. Like, this is the change.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I view this election as a turning point, like a fork in the road of destiny that is incredibly important.
Greg Gutfeld especially had fun with her speeches about electric vehicles. He often pointed out how Kamala Harris seemed particularly excited about electric school buses. Critics joked that while major topics like infrastructure and power grid expansion needed attention, the spotlight kept returning to the image of bright yellow electric buses, as if a smoother ride to school could solve everything. Gutfeld compared it to repainting the Titanic while it was still sinking. Then there were her international trips. When she visited countries like Poland and Germany, some critics said the tone felt more like leading a summer camp icebreaker than handling serious diplomacy. There were nervous laughs, broad slogans, and a few moments that commentators labeled awkward. Joe Rogan joked that watching her at a global summit felt like seeing a substitute teacher attempt to explain nuclear disarmament in the most simplified way possible. What critics found most surprising was how she was often presented as a strong symbol of leadership while, in their view, sidestepping direct accountability. They argued she delegated heavily, avoided direct answers, and stepped back when decisions became controversial.
You say one nice thing about Kamala Harris?
I mean, she's there.
Yeah. Good job.
I mean, if this is Rocky, then it's Rocky IV, and Biden's Apollo, and Nancy Pelosi's the Russian that kills him. But like Donnie Douche, he said he's in love with her, and now his sex doll is very jealous.
Greg Gutfeld joked that her style was basically leadership by proxy, saying her main skill seemed to be existing loudly near the president. Even members of her own party sometimes struggled to defend her behind closed doors, treating her like a walking PR headache. Her poll numbers fell so low that commentators joked they were tunneling alongside Joe Biden's approval ratings. Joe Rogan compared her support base to the Loch Ness Monster. rumored to exist, but nobody could show real proof. Her media appearances, of course, were unforgettable. Whether on late-night shows or daytime segments, Harris would show up ready to shine, without actually saying much. It was like watching someone confidently smile while solving a math problem with interpretive dance. Gutfeld said her interviews were basically the political equivalent of modern art. You weren't expected to understand them, just nod and pretend it made sense.
Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago? The one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake? And as soon as they felt the earth shaking beneath their feet, they got in a circle and stood next to each other to protect the most vulnerable. Think about it. What a powerful metaphor.
Yeah. It's almost like they built a wall.
Joe Rogan took aim at her debate performances from back when she tried to project the iron fist in a velvet glove, but ended up sounding more like a lecture from a weary HR manager. She roasted her own party rivals during the primaries, only to join them later with the enthusiasm of someone politely pretending to enjoy a bland vegan casserole. Her authenticity felt fleeting, like a viral TikTok trend, and the audience noticed. Beyond her confusing speeches and occasional disappearing act leadership, Harris became a goldmine for Rogan and Greg Gutfeld because of how the media tried so hard to present her as brilliant. Every time she spoke in vague riddles or fumbled through a press conference, mainstream outlets called it bold, strategic, or nuanced. Rogan likened it to trying to sell decaf as rocket fuel, while Gutfeld joked about her reverse Midas touch. Anything she endorsed seemed to fall apart faster. She once went on a national tour to promote voting rights and ended up in a viral moment looking utterly confused, leaving even her supporters pleading for her to stop helping.
Like, wasn't she like a joke even among Democrats? Like 10 seconds ago? Like literally, like a day ago.
Yep.
And now it's like the country's rallying around.
I know.
Like,
yeah.
What? I don't know. I don't even.
Yeah, we're so easily manipulated, and they're all doing it in lockstep. Yeah, no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. She was she polled as the least popular vice president of all time.
Yeah.
She is. I had dinner with a friend of mine recently who actually knows her. He says she's very smart.
And nothing was more ironic than her image as a champion of justice while sidestepping questions about her own prosecutorial record, like it was an unexpected pop quiz. Harris, the supposed reformer, seemed to forget that she had once served as an attorney general with a record full of tough-on-crime policies and controversial cases. Joe Rogan didn't need to exaggerate. He just laid out her record, and the contradiction made people laugh. Then came the infamous bus ride moment, where she giggled through a speech on economic growth while gas prices and inflation were climbing. Greg Gutfeld joked it was like throwing a pizza party during a famine and calling it morale boosting. Her exit from office wasn't dramatic, it was more of a slow fade into irrelevance, moving as enthusiastically as an unplugged alarm clock. Yet somehow, even in quiet moments, she managed to trend thanks to awkward interviews, confusing speeches, and treating every camera like a personal improv stage. Rogan quipped that if aliens landed and Harris was their first contact, they'd assume Earth ran on diggles and inspirational gibberish, and then leave immediately.
The Avengers get together like, hey, are you trying to get me to hate superhero movies? You trying to show me your real weird personalities and get me to hate superhero movies?
Kamala forever! That's better.
Why are you doing that? If I was running the Avengers, I'd be like, hey guys, cut this shit. Do you think one person is gonna vote for Kamala Harris because they saw that Iron Man wants them to vote for Kamala Harris? Are you crazy?
Buffalo reminded everyone that Harris was supposed to be the heir apparent, the next big thing in leadership. So what did America actually get? A mix of missed opportunities, verbal gymnastics, and a masterclass in saying a lot without really saying anything. Joe Rogan called her career a clear example of what happens when style outweighs substance and expectations start to crush you. Harris wasn't a villain, more like a cameo in a story that really needed a lead. Some joked her biggest achievement was lowering the bar so far that future leaders might need a backhoe just to find it. And let's not forget her final press tour, when she briefly reappeared to endorse policies she had previously struggled to explain. Greg Gutfeld said it felt like watching a sitcom character suddenly appear in a serious drama. Awkward, out of place, and clearly just for attention. The setup? A microphone, a confused audience, and a metaphor about time.
Kamala Harris is the Democrat candidate for president of the United States. I'll give you a second to come to. The border czar who couldn't find our southern border on a map of Texas now wants to be America's commander-in-chief. Kamala couldn't lead a campfire sing-along, let alone the country's armed forces. But does that matter? Not to the media. Now, they would like this framed as a team sport battle, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. But in reality, it's the media narrative machine versus...
This roast isn't over. As long as political ambition gets confused with PR strategy and leaders think vague slogans are enough to run a country, there will always be another Harris waiting in the wings. And Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld will be ready, loaded with sarcasm and hot takes for the next episode of America's most unintentionally funny political sitcom. She didn't just fade from relevance, she practically tripped over her own teleprompter on the way out. Kamala's political grand finale felt less like a mic drop and more like a fumbled handoff in a relay race. Nobody was watching, and even her own party seemed to distance themselves faster than a mistaken reply-all email. Her legacy? A trail of nervous laughter, confusing metaphors, and policy promises that aged about as well as unrefrigerated seafood.
There was a way that I could do it, and I even offered to do it late that night. So the night that Trump came on, I'm like, what if we do her, like when she's done in Texas, if she came here? But no one ever committed to doing it. This is like really important because they keep pretending that I lied or I did this or I did that. They never committed to doing it. Well, we went through, I've got a whole, we have all the receipts, by the way.
Of course.
I have a whole list of conversations that took.
Joe Rogan wrapped it up by saying her career showed that charisma without substance is just theater. And Harris wasn't Broadway, she was more like community improv night with a broken spotlight. Every policy speech felt like someone trying to do algebra with finger puppets, and the audience clapped mostly because they weren't sure if she was done or still buffering. Greg Gutfeld, at his sharpest, joked, "If Harris were a brand, she'd be the mystery flavor of a failed soda. Briefly hyped, quickly forgotten, and now a trivia question nobody wants to answer." Her story became a lesson in overpromising and underdelivering, all wrapped up in nervous laughs and deflective slogans. In the end, Harris didn't redefine leadership. She redefined how low expectations could go while still earning primetime coverage. A true masterclass in political airbulling. As she slips into the back pages of history, one thing is clear: the next chapter in politics will be hard to top in confusion disguised as confidence. And let's face it, the sequel is probably already in the works.